Day 1, the beginning of the end. The first day was silent. News outlets reported sporadic cases of violent outbreaks, but offered little in terms of explanation. All people knew was that it started in cities, quickly overwhelming densely populated areas before creeping outward. Hospitals filled with patients suffering from fevers and convulsions. By midday, they stopped letting people in entirely, barricading their doors from the inside. The infected transformed over the next few hours, their eyes clouding with white, their skin greying, and their flesh sloughing off as if they'd been left to rot for days. For those in rural areas, the first signs of the outbreak were subtle. One farmer watched his neighbour stumble into his yard, babbling and gasping, his face twisted with fear and agony. As the man drew closer, the farmer noticed his skin was flaking, blood trickling from his mouth. The farmer ran inside, locking the door and praying his family would remain safe. But by nightfall, the entire countryside could hear the screams echoing from town to town. Day 2, the government response. The following day, government forces mobilized to regain control of the situation. Military vehicles rumbled down highways and jets screeched overhead, carrying orders to contain the infection by any means necessary. Civilians were urged to stay indoors, and curfews were set up, with troops enforcing the lockdown. In one major city, rumours circulated of a quarantine zone set up at an old airstrip. Anyone who could get there would be granted refuge and safety, promised protection from the growing horde of infected. The streets were chaos, people running over each other in desperate attempts to reach the airstrip. By the time they arrived, though, the infected had already breached the zone, tearing through the fences and overwhelming the soldiers stationed there. What had been a symbol of hope quickly turned into a massacre, with no survivors left to tell the tale. Amidst the chaos, the government scientists struggled to analyze the infection. As the lab reports rolled in, they found that it was more than just a virus. It was an amalgamation of something viral and something supernatural. The head of research, Dr. Elena Marlowe, made a chilling note in her journal. The infected are not just dead. They are claimed. Something has touched them beyond the veil. Day 3, Shadows of the Fallen. As the infection spread, survivors noticed figures lurking in the shadows. Tall, cloaked in darkness, moving with an intelligence that the infected lacked. Survivors who'd barely escaped spoke of encounters with the fallen, beings who radiated a malevolent aura and seemed to guide the infected with silent commands. The fallen moved through the ruined streets, casting long shadows that seemed to consume light itself. The infected would pause in their presence, bowing their heads as if in reverence before turning and resuming their hunt for survivors. The fallen were neither zombie nor human. They were something in between, creatures that had been overtaken by the infection but preserved in their intellect and purpose. They appeared to be leaders, entities capable of herding the infected like shepherds guiding a dark flock. Survivors quickly learned to flee if they saw one of these beings. A rumor began to circulate that these fallen were once part of an ancient cult, reanimated as heralds for a god of death and decay. At night, survivors huddled in basements and cellars, lighting candles and praying that the fallen would pass them by. They began drawing protective symbols around their makeshift shelters, hoping against hope that these rituals might keep them safe from the horrors outside. Day 4, the hunt for artifacts. In the wake of the government's collapse, radio signals grew scarce. Only one broadcast remained, a signal transmitted from somewhere deep in the heart of the country. It called out to survivors, urging them to seek out relics, powerful artifacts that could protect against the infection. This group, calling themselves the Order of the Phoenix, claimed these relics had the power to disrupt the forces guiding the infected. The Order believed these relics were fragments of ancient civilizations, remnants of a forgotten era when humanity had faced a similar darkness. Each artifact emitted a strange energy, as something akin to electromagnetic radiation, but with an otherworldly quality. Survivors who carried them found that the infected would avoid them, as if repelled by the energy these objects radiated. But these artifacts were not without risk. They had an eerie way of distorting reality. Hallucinations, strange visions, and whispered voices were common side effects. Mira, a former archaeologist turned survivor, decided to search for these relics. She recalled reading about a local museum rumored to have ancient artifacts in its collection. Gathering a small group, she led an expedition there. They fought their way through hordes of infected to reach the building, only to find the relic encased in a glass case, seemingly untouched by the chaos around it. As she reached for the relic, she felt a sharp chill run through her, like a shadow passing over her soul. Day 5, the Evolved Ones. As the infection grew more potent, new strains began to appear. These creatures were faster, smarter, and more agile than the initial wave of infected. Some had elongated limbs and sharpened claws, capable of scaling walls and striking with deadly precision. Others seemed to possess a degree of intelligence, even able to form simple words and mock their prey. Survivors started calling these new horrors the Evolved Ones. They learned to avoid the day's dwindling light and attack just as night fell, exploiting the survivors' vulnerability and desperation. Those unfortunate enough to encounter these new strains often didn't live to tell the tale. The Fallen appeared to watch over these Evolved Ones, like masters observing their hounds, sending them into human encampments to sow terror and leave nothing but ruin in their wake. The survivors' only hope was in unity. Small bands formed, sharing resources and skills. Each night they huddled together, knowing that with every sunset the Evolved Ones would become bolder, their tactics sharper, their strength even greater. Among these survivors was Jace, a former soldier with extensive survival training. He took it upon himself to teach others to fight back, organizing patrols and setting traps to slow down the Evolved Ones. His efforts offered a glimmer of hope, though many whispered that even he seemed shaken by the enemies they faced. Day 6. The Cult of the Darkness. By the 6th day, despair began to take hold. Survivors turned to whatever they could find for comfort or guidance, and soon a cult known as the Cult of the Darkness emerged. Its followers preached that the infection was divine retribution, a reckoning for humanity's hubris. They believed that only by embracing the infection could one achieve eternal life, transcending mortality to become part of the darkness. Led by a charismatic figure called the Prophet of Shadows, the cult lured desperate souls with promises of immunity from the infection. They claimed to possess knowledge of ancient rituals, symbols, and incantations that would grant one the power of the fallen, yet those who joined the cult were often never seen again, vanishing into the night to perform twisted ceremonies that were said to involve blood and sacrifice. The cult left symbols scrawled on the walls of abandoned buildings, disturbing runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Survivors would wake to find these symbols near their shelters, etched in blood. Some believed the cult was aligned with the fallen, acting as their human emissaries. To encounter a cultist was almost as dangerous as encountering an infected, as they seemed to possess an unnatural strength and an eerie silence. Day 7. The Blood Moon. On the 7th night, something changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turned a deep, unnatural red. Survivors had heard of the blood moon before, an event spoken of in hushed whispers. According to legend, the blood moon was a signal, a call to the dead. A night when the infection's power reached its peak. On this night, the infected became unstoppable. Their strength doubled, their hunger insatiable. The evolved ones and the fallen moved as one, a dark legion marching with terrifying purpose. In a final act of defiance, Mira, Jace, and the last group of survivors gathered their artifacts and prepared for the onslaught. They placed the relics in a circle, hoping the ancient energy would repel the infected. As they huddled together, the light from the relics cast a warm glow around them, a last barrier against the encroaching darkness. The fallen surrounded the group, their forms flickering like shadows in the firelight. One stepped forward, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to echo from beyond reality. "You have fought well, mortals, but the time of humanity is over. Embrace the darkness, or perish." But Mira stood firm, holding her relic high. "We will not surrender to you," she whispered, her voice steady. "We will fight, even if it's our last stand." And as the blood moon rose to its peak, the survivors made their final stand, weapons in hand, as a tide of darkness crashed upon them, determined to extinguish the last light of humanity. In the world of Darkness Falls, survival isn't just about outlasting the infected. It's about resisting the very corruption that's claiming the earth, fighting not only the dead but also the darkness itself.